Winter had always been harsh in our town, but that year it was brutal. Snow fell in relentless sheets, piling high against the edges of roads, blanketing yards, and turning even short walks into treacherous treks. I had grown used to a tour, so I thought, until the Homeowners Association, HOA, made my life a living nightmare. They weren't just strict about rules. They thrived on control, dictating everything from paint colors to hedge heights. But when the snow started coming down, I realized their obsession with authority could extend even to my own driveway. It started innocuously enough. The HOA's contractor came through, clearing streets and common areas. They would scoop the snow off main roads and sidewalks fine. But then I noticed it. The trucks started dumping mountains of snow onto my driveway, directly in front of my garage. At first, I thought it was accidental, a sloppy miscalculation. But day after day, the piles grew higher, blocking me in, forcing me to shovel multiple times a day just to get out. I called the HOA, polite but firm. They dismissed me with vague promises and excuses. "Oh, we're trying to keep the road safe," they said. "It's just temporary." Temporary turned into weeks, and the snow became a fortress. The situation escalated when my neighbors started whispering about me, as if I'd done something wrong. "You really should comply," one said, eyes wide with fear of HOA wrath. Comply? Comply with what, being buried under snow, while they laughed behind their corporate-looking offices? No. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about snow. It was about power. They were testing me, and I refused to be intimidated. I spent hours planning. I observed the trucks, noted their schedules, and tracked which street they considered priority. The HOA relied on efficiency, predictability, and fear to maintain control. They didn't account for someone who could think like them. Bureaucratic chains. I started small, moving a few piles of snow, strategically blocking a narrow alley, redirecting runoff, forcing their drivers to reroute. The initial effects were minor but satisfying. A few trucks stalled, drivers cursing under their breath as their usual paths were disrupted. It gave me confidence, a blueprint for something larger. By mid-January, my driveway was an impassable snowbank, courtesy of the HOA's own contractors. I no longer viewed it as a nuisance. It became a tool. I started hauling snow in bulk, not just shoveling, but using the old plow I had inherited from my grandfather. It had been sitting in my shed for years, forgotten under layers of dust, waiting for the right moment. Now it roared to life, and I felt a surge of control I hadn't felt since my youth. Every scoop of snow became a statement. I would no longer be their victim. Then came the idea that changed everything. If they could block my property with snow, why couldn't I return the favor? I studied the streets, noting the main thoroughfares, and emergency routes. There was one stretch, in particular the narrow access road, leading directly to the HOA offices and the neighborhood's communal facilities. I realized that if I could pile enough snow there, it would immobilize the HOA's operations completely. They'd be trapped the way I had been. It was risky, very risky. But I had endured weeks of harassment, humiliation, and cold. The risk now felt like justice. The night I started was bitterly cold. The wind sliced through my jacket as I fired up the plow, the engine growling with purpose. 1 scoop, 2 scoops, hour after hour, snow cascading like a white tsunami. By sunrise, the narrow road had become a wall of frozen defiance. Cars would have to turn back, deliveries would stall, and the HOA would finally feel powerless. Morning brought chaos. I watched from a safe distance as their first trucks arrived, plowing cautiously down the road only to be met by an impassable barricade. Drivers cursed, radios crackling with frantic calls to the office. Soon, the HOA manager arrived in a rented SUV, walking the line of snow with a clipboard, muttering numbers, complaints, and threats. I stayed hidden, camera in hand, documenting everything. If they tried legal action, and I knew they would die, had proof. They had created the problem by dumping snow onto private property first. By noon, rumors of the snow blockade spread throughout the neighborhood. Other residents came to gawk, some snapping pictures, others laughing behind their gloves. A few sympathetic neighbors even brought hot coffee and blankets for me, acknowledging silently that the HOA had gone too far. That alone felt like a victory. I had turned their tools against them, using their obsession with control to reveal their own incompetence. The HOA didn't respond quietly. They sent emails, threats of fines, letters from lawyers threatening litigation for obstruction of community operations. I read them with amusement. Their words were sharp but powerless against the reality. The snow was solid, deep, and strategically placed. Every legal threat was met with a photographic record of their own misconduct. Every call met with the same unyielding barrier of ice. They were furious, and I basked quietly in their frustration. Days passed. Trucks came and went, trying to chip away at the barricade. But I had learned the tricks of snow management from my own months of being trapped. Any attempt to plow through was met with immediate resistance. Strategically frozen edges, slippery slopes, and piled drifts too high to move. It became a standoff, a silent war fought in white. My neighbors watched, some cheering, some nervous. The HOA finally sent a private investigator, likely expecting to find me violating rules or creating unsafe conditions. What they found instead was meticulous planning, precision, and undeniable justice in action. The turning point came when a news crew arrived. A local journalist had picked up the story, a tale of ordinary homeowners fighting back against an overbearing HOA. The footage showed the barricade in all its glory, the frozen wall stretching across the street, blocking access to the very offices that had tormented me. Interviews with neighbors revealed quiet support for my actions, framing it as an act of civil resistance rather than petty retaliation. Suddenly, the HOA's authority was no longer unquestioned. Their image of control shattered before a camera lens. With the public watching, the HOA capitulated. They began negotiating, offering compromises, and finally agreeing to remove snow from my driveway. I accepted their offer, but on my own terms. They would provide a formal apology, compensate for damages, and implement a fairer snow policy for the future. It was more than victory. It was accountability. I had endured weeks of harassment and cold, turned their own tactics against them, and emerged not just unscathed, but empowered. Winter receded, leaving only memories of frost and control battles. I had transformed my property from a victimized space into a fortress of agency. Every neighbor who had doubted me, every truck that had dumped snow in disregard, every letter of threat now existed as proof that calculated resistance could work. The snow, once an instrument of oppression, had become a weapon of justice. I learned something profound that winter. Control can be challenged, and even the smallest of people can block the wheels of bureaucracy when strategy, courage, and persistence come together. In the end, it wasn't just about snow. It was about boundaries, respect, and refusing to let others dictate your life. The HOA never underestimated me again, and I never underestimated the power of a carefully planned, frozen stand. Winter had brought a reckoning, and it left behind a story that people still tell when snow falls too heavily. How one homeowner turned the tables, built a wall, and made the tyrants finally feel the cold.